Hello and welcome to the Art Class Curator podcast. I am Cindy Ingram, your host and the founder of Art Class Curator and the Curated Connections Library. We're here to talk about teaching art with purpose and inspiration, from the daily delights of creativity to the messy mishaps that come with being a teacher. Whether you're driving home from school or cleaning up your classroom for the 15th time today, take a second, take a deep breath, relax those shoulders, and let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Art Class Curator podcast. And I have something I'm super excited to share with you today. Over the last many months, I have been really exploring what really brings me joy in the work that I do. And you'll learn in a few weeks on the podcast about this experience we had over the summer at a summer workshop that we offer at Art Class Curator. That episode will be coming out in a few weeks. I don't know which exact date it is, but we had a really magical, powerful experience with the group of teachers that came on the second day. And after that, and along with all this work I've been doing throughout the last few years, I've really realized that I am super passionate about spending time with people with works of art, and helping teachers bring them to their students is wonderful and valuable. But I also really want to be the teacher again, be in those conversations about the art rather than helping you facilitate them. So I have a brand new program that I'm going to be offering, and it's not just for teachers. It is for anybody. And so in this episode, I am actually doing an interview with Lisa Carpenter for her podcast called Full Frontal Living. Now, Lisa Carpenter is a friend of mine. She is also my former coach. We're also colleagues, business colleagues. I've known her for several years, and we have a really special relationship. And this conversation with her for her podcast, after it was over, I realized I really wanted to share this conversation with you as well. So you will hear her interviewing me, and you'll hear her talk about the things that she likes to talk about. And her podcast is a lot about self-care and helping you manage your sort of work-life balance and getting out of the doing and into the being. It's a really she's a wonderful coach and a wonderful human being. And so I encourage you to listen to her podcast if what she talks about today resonates with you. So this is an episode from her podcast, reposted on my podcast. I'm the guest on the podcast, and I even walk her through an art interpretation exercise in the episode as well, and also share a little bit about these new Art Connection Circles, which are going to start soon on November 8th. So if you're interested in that, you can get more information at the end of the episode. You can also visit artclasscurator.com/circle and get more information about this upcoming program. But I'm super thrilled about this interview and super thrilled about this direction that we are going in. And I can't wait to have these powerful personal conversations about art with you if you join us. All right. Thanks so much to Lisa, and here is our interview.
Hey, listeners. Thanks for tuning into another episode of the Full Frontal Living podcast. And I have a really special guest on with me today. I was super excited to bring her on the podcast. And we're going to be talking about something that I haven't really ever dove into, but if you've been listening for a while, I talk a lot about how to care for yourself. We talk a lot about emotional fluency, what it means to feel your feelings. And this lady, Cindy Ingram, who is a former client of mine, she's also become a good friend. She's a colleague. We have quite an interesting history together as I've gotten to know her. She is going to walk us through today art as a way to connect with our emotions, because this came up on a conversation between her and I a while ago, because you probably have never thought about this, but art is such a great way to connect with your emotions. And especially during the pandemic, I know for me, art has become really powerful, but not necessarily your traditional, what we think of as art. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But Cindy, can you go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody? Let them know who you are, what you do, your background, because you have such an interesting story about where you were and versus where you are now.
Yes. Hello. I'm so excited to be here and always fun to talk to you. So yes, my name is Cindy Ingram, and I am a former art teacher and a former museum educator. So when I was in school growing up, I always wanted to be a Disney animator. I was obsessed with Disney movies, but I lived in this small town and we didn't have art museums or, art to explore. So my only way of really connecting with art was in my art classes and then also watching these Disney movies. And I realized pretty early on in my life that there was something about me that had a really intense emotional connection with works of art, theater, movies, visual art, music. Like it would always just deeply moved me. And I saw Lion King at the movie theater 12 times when I was in the 8th grade. And I would cry every single time. So that was like my first real art connection was the Lion King. And I realized too, throughout my career, I went to Europe when I was in high school with a teacher led us on a trip around Europe. And that's when I got to see like real art for the first time. And I saw that people worked there. And I saw that there are people that get to spend their lives looking at art, talking about art, being in the presence of art. And I was hooked from then on. I decided to get my degree in art history and really have just followed the magic of art ever since. And it wasn't until I was trying to get my PhD in art history. I was doing my applications and I was, doing my GRE and filling out writing all the essays. And then I went to an art museum and had this interaction with a work of art, and I couldn't leave it. It was like I was punched in the stomach. I was crying. I was mesmerized by this painting. I couldn't walk away. I just stood there for probably an hour, 2 hours. My husband saw the whole exhibit and then came all the way back around. And I'm still there in front of this painting. And what I realized in that moment was that I don't ever want to lose this sort of magical emotional connection I had with art. Mm-hmm. And I worried if I got my PhD in art history, that I would learn too much and it would lose the magic that it had. And in that moment too, I realized that I want everyone else to experience this magic too. And that's when I decided to completely shift gears and do education instead of art history, because I really wanted everybody to have this sort of powerful experience that I am capable of having. And so I started to teach about works of art in creative ways. And then I eventually started my business, Art Class Curator, where I help art teachers connect works of art into their classroom with their students. Because a lot of art teachers don't know how to do that. They mostly know how to make art, and the looking at art is not something they're really taught all that much. So I've been helping teachers for the last few years. And as I've been doing that, I've just been diving deeper into realizing that my emotional connection to works of art is my magic. That is something that has always been something that has driven me. And it's always been something that I have loved. And I didn't until the last few years realize that what I'm doing when I'm looking at works of art is self-development. What I'm doing is working on myself. I'm not learning about art. I'm learning about myself through my interactions with art. And ever since I really had that connection, that click, it's really been so fun to explore and to help other people explore their own connection with art too.
It's so profound because, one of the things that we worked on when we were working together was you really coming back home to feeling safe, feeling your feelings. Like with most of my clients, right? They'd rather be up in their heads and think their way through stuff. So it's really fascinating that all along, you've been a very deep feeler and an empath. And art was always that connection where you felt safe to feel your feelings, but out in the world, you didn't. And, for so many of us, right? Like when I have clients that say, well, I'm not a crier, or I'm not a this, or I'm not a that. If I can say, well, have you ever listened to a song and cried? Or have you ever looked at a beautiful sunrise or sunset and cried? Almost every single one of them have that kind of experience, but we don't necessarily tie it to the fact that, art is one of the things that allows me to safely feel my feelings. And I know, over the pandemic, and I've had Joan Marie on the podcast before because she did that beautiful painting of me. And that literally shifted something in my body when I saw it. It's still a very powerful thing that I ground myself with. And over the pandemic, I was joking with you about how much time I've spent watching art, but not necessarily in the traditional sense. What most people don't know is like, I'm a total, like I die over watching creatives create. So whether it's body painting, tattoo artists, metal sculptures, glass blowing, we talked about it. Like if there's a reality show where people are making shit, I am all over it. Baking, oh my God, the amount of like baking, cake creating things I've watched, because to me, that is people expressing their art in such amazing and phenomenal ways. And I'm always moved by it. Even if it's like a cake that's a monster, I'm still moved by it because it really, art has this ability to profoundly shift us. So you've been working with teachers for a long time, and now you're starting to realize that you have a gift that needs to reach even more people in terms of talking about how they can use art as self-care and as self-development, like you said. So can you talk a little bit more about what that can look like for people, how they can start thinking about art as play and self-care?
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you an example of this to help illustrate it, that you talked about how, me feeling my feelings art was a safe place to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm obsessed with the musical Hamilton. Super fan Hamilton. I've seen it like 4 times. I'm about to see it again in a few months. I'm just totally in love with it. I think it's one of the best artworks ever made. But I have a hard time with like watching the news and seeing like really sad news stories. I as an empath, it really wears me down. And finally, there was at one point I was pregnant, and I used to listen to NPR every day on the way to and from work. And finally, I couldn't do that anymore because I would just sit there and cry about every single news story. And every time I've seen Hamilton, there's been something that resonated about something in my life. So like the first time I saw it, my life, my business I couldn't seem to figure it out. I knew I had this great thing. I knew that it was going to be successful, but I wasn't getting anywhere with it. And I was feeling kind of stuck with it. So the first time I saw Hamilton, I really resonated with Aaron Burr's character. He spends the whole time just waiting, and everybody's passing him up, and everybody else is getting opportunities that he's not getting, and he's not seeing. And so every time he was on stage, like I was just crying, and I was just like, I could really feel connected to him in that way. And so then the next time I saw it in Houston, and a week before I saw it in Houston, there was a school shooting within an hour of Houston. And it was, multiple students died in the school shooting. And those get me the hardest, with like most parents and teachers too. I was a teacher, and my kids, and just the worst thing imaginable. But I never allow myself to really truly think about it, because I will just go into the depths of despair, But in Hamilton, his son dies by gunfire. And so I'm sitting there watching his mom mourn the son, and knowing an hour away that is happening in real life, that kids died by gunfire and their parents are crying over them, And so, but it allowed me to process those feelings. It allowed me to feel them. And I started crying, and I was still crying like an hour after the show was over. Like that happens kind of midway through, and I was still crying. But it gave me a safe space to process my feelings, to feel them, and to really allow myself to go there when, it feels really scary to just cry about something that feels so hopeless. And so it really helped me then. And then, I saw Hamilton again, and I was a really happy time in my life. And the whole time, like all of the Schuyler Sisters songs, it was like celebratory songs. So it's like every art meets you wherever you are in your life. When whatever you're going with, whatever you're dealing with, art can help you process it. You can use it. You can use it like you would use like a spiritual text, like a Bible or any other spiritual text. You go and read it, and you look for advice in your current life, and you look to kind of reframe what you're going through. You can do the exact same thing through engaging with art as you can with books and spiritual texts and things like that.
It's so profound what you said. Art meets you wherever you are in your life. Because many people may not know, like I was very much like all my clients, like I didn't even let people hug me. And I know you get this.
Yeah.
Don't hug me. Don't hug me. I didn't let people hug me because I didn't want to feel whatever I was feeling. And it was a journey for me to get out of my head and learn how to feel my emotions. And even still to this day, I have to watch that I don't default into like doing activities or trying to think my way through, and just allow myself to feel. So I actually have, and I've talked about this before, I have a crying playlist. I have a playlist of songs that I put on when I know that I need to cry. And I can look back through. So music has always been probably the most profound piece of art that I've always used in my life, and nature. I can think about Pink, but specifically like Adele. Adele has those moments for me. Like I can remember certain songs, putting them on and like writing stuff and having such a hard time. And, you know, her new single just came out, which is called Easy on Me. And this has been such a challenging year for so many of us, 2 years. You know, I've been having a lot of things come up, and that song came on the other day and it just like washed right over me and just took me under. And I needed it. Like I needed to feel that because I needed that music to really allow me to completely emote. And when we kind of like, you know, we loosen the radiator cap, so to speak, we let enough out to give ourselves a little bit of relief, but then we're still pushing down that emotion. Eventually it's going to create illness in our body, or it comes out in bad behavior. So I just think that most people don't think about how they can use different forms of art, whether it's music, pictures. You even hear about artists all the time. Like so many artists will say, my art saved me. Like I found art because I need, you know, this thing happened in my life and I needed a place where I could pour my energy into. So it's just, I just don't think most people are thinking about art this way. And I think so many people have, you know, Brene Brown calls them like, what is it? Art wounds, where we don't believe that we're smart enough to look at art. Because even when you said like standing in the gallery and seeing all, you know, all these works of art, and I'm like, there's such a stigma around, oh, only hoity-toity people.
Oh yeah.
What is a hoity-toity person, right? Like, who am I to go in and look at a piece of art? So how do you walk people into understanding that art is for everyone, especially when we're talking about, you know, real like works of art, paintings on the wall?
Yeah, it's that mindset is so prevalent, and it's something that museum educators and museum staff have been working to fight for a really long time. When I was teaching college, I would assign my students a museum visit, but before I did that, I would do an activity that was like a museum personification. I'm like, well, if the art museum was a person, what would they be like? And so they'd have to write an essay. And their answers were always like really well-dressed, really cultured, really like rich, drives a fancy car, drinks fancy wines, thinks they're better than, you know, it was that sort of vibe. Yeah. And so that's how I got to talk to them about like, why do you think that? Like, what's true about that? Who's making you think that way? And kind of break down those sort of stereotypes of what a museum is. And I think a lot of people feel like, you know, art, capital A, fine art is something that is outside of you. It's something that is, you need something to be able to enjoy it. You're not good enough because you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not deep enough to connect with it. Or you find it, and so you're just automatically shut off to it. And then also, there's a lot of boring art in the world, to be honest. There's like pictures of cows and you're like, oh, well, I don't get this. I think a lot of people think if they don't understand a particular type of art, they don't like a particular type of art, that there's something wrong with them. There's not something wrong with the art. It's something that is.
I just wrote that down. I'm like, if I'm looking at something and I'm like, how is this worth hundreds of thousands of dollars? Like, am I missing something? Am I stupid here? Like, what is going on? Because I'm not getting how this is better than what Jake has done when he was 8, right? Like, so it's kind of like this disconnect around, okay, how can I just appreciate it for, you know, what it is?
Yeah. And you don't have to like all of it. You know, I've dedicated my life. I'm 40 years old. I've spent, you know, most of my 40 years looking at and learning about art. There's lots of art I don't like. And there's nothing wrong with the art and there's nothing wrong with me. It's just, It doesn't resonate with me. And that's totally fine.
That's true with music too, right? Because for the most part, I like many genres. And then there's some that I'm like, I can't get there. I just can't get there. And even, you know, recently we had an opportunity to do the immersive Van Gogh. Was here in Vancouver. So Jake was a little bit bored with all the reading stuff and I had to read it all, right? Because I was so fascinated with his history and his background. And I really love the stories behind people. I think that that's really what captivates me with art too, is I want to know more about the artist and the life and the story and what they were struggling with and all those things. But I mean, when we walked in there, it literally took my breath away. And there were many of his paintings that I'm like, I'm not digging this one in the field with the farmer. And then there are other ones where I'm just like, oh, I just want to lie down here. I just want to lie down and let this wash all over me. So I think that that's really important too, is that you don't have to like everything, but are you willing to be open and curious and explore and even ask yourself like, well, what about it is it that I don't like? Because there's so many things that we can learn about ourselves just in that. So instead of just saying, well, I don't like it, well, what don't you like about it? Just with curiosity, not with judgment. So, it's the same thing when we meet people. I don't like them. Well, why? Like, what is it about them? Because it's telling you something about yourself, maybe about your values or some of your beliefs.
Yeah, that's what I was going to point out, is that, it's going to tell you something about your values if there's something in there that's rubbing you the wrong way. Like, there's this one artwork that I came across. It's in Minneapolis, I think. It's the artist is Dorothea Tanning, but I don't remember the name of the painting. But it's yellow and it's like really cloudy, and there's figures in there, but you can't really make them out. And I instantly saw that and like recoiled. Like, my body had this like visceral like disgust, like an anxiety, and I was like, "Whoa, I can't look at that one." But I kept kind of going back to it because I was like, I wanted to explore like why am I feeling that way? And so I ultimately figured out it was that lack of clarity. It was that like the fogginess, and there was no certainty in there, and you couldn't tell anything that was going on. And it was really just uncomfortable to be in that space. But it allowed me to think more about like, well, why am I, and what other places am I uncomfortable when it's like that, when it's that cloudy and foggy. And so,
yeah, all the different insights. I mean, I have a client right now who she composes music, which I think is just like astounding, because I can see the finished piece, right? I can hear the finished piece, and I'm like, how do you layer in? How do you know what instruments to put in? Like, it's such an art. But she came in and she described all of my other clients by different instruments, right? Like, seeing people as if they were an instrument, this is what they would be. And I just thought, wow, that's a beautiful way to describe people also through an art form, right? And she uses her art to heal people and tell stories through music. There's just so many amazing ways out there to really use art to heal. And I think that is such an important place where we're at is, so many people think that self-care is about going and doing something, right? I got to go do this. I got to do that. I got to go get my nails done or whatever. And self-care for me is really, a way of being. How can I appreciate my day? What questions can I ask myself? What do I need to explore? And art is such a simple way to pause. So if somebody doesn't like journaling, well, there's nothing stopping them from looking at a piece of art or listening to a piece of music and then just saying like, okay, well, what's here for me today? What can I learn from this in this moment? And this is really kind of what you're starting to dive into with this new project that you've decided to put together. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I'm super excited about this. And this is why I wanted you on the podcast, because I believe that many of my listeners will be really curious about how they can approach art in a different way and in a healing way. Because I really believe that after everything everybody's been through, I think most people don't recognize how much, I'm going to use this word, it might sound a little dramatic, but how much trauma we've all walked through. Because it has been trauma. There's been a lot of sadness, grief, anger, frustration, like you name it. We've gone through the whole emotional gamut this year, but most people aren't really expressing those emotions because they don't know how. So that's why I was really excited about this idea that you'd put together. So talk a little bit about what it is, how it's going to be able to help people, and how you're going to have so much fun. You're going to have so much fun doing it.
I'm so excited. Yes. Okay. So, I've been serving teachers for the last 7 years with my business, and I've been helping them help their students connect with works of art. And I've been feeling really disconnected from that because to me, those conversations that when I was teaching, there was nothing better in this world than standing in front of a work of art with a group of students, no matter the age, adults, kids, any age, and just talking about it. And I miss that so much. I'm teaching other teachers how to do that, but that fuels my soul so much having those conversations. So I have decided to create a program for anybody, not teachers, just anybody who wants to explore their connection with works of art and do so with a group of people who also are interested in doing that. So I'm creating what's called an art connection circle, and I'm kind of viewing it almost like it's like a book club, kind of, where we're coming together with the goal of exploring works of art. And, I will lead through the process. I will teach the people in the program how to some strategies for connecting with art, some strategies for interpreting, some practices that will help you kind of dive deeper into the meaning of the artwork. So it's kind of some hand holding, but also a lot of freedom to really explore what you bring. And what's so magical about this experience is you bring one painting to a group of people, and everybody is going to have a different experience with it. So being in a group where we're all talking about it together, you learn from the other people, you hear what their insights are, you relate that to yours, because everybody's problems and issues are so similar, just tweaked in different ways. And so hearing everybody's insights on a work of art is just so incredibly meaningful and powerful. So I want this to be a really kind of intimate group of people. We meet and we discuss art and we talk about our feelings and really dive into that connection, not just to learn about art and how to look at art, but to learn about yourself through your interaction with the art.
And this isn't just so we're clear, people, this isn't like thousands of people. This is going to be an intimate group. You put together a Google Doc. There's nothing fancy here because, Cindy and I were talking about how, especially right now in our businesses, just wanting to do things that feel inspiring to us, that really bring us closer to that sense of joy. And as entrepreneurs, we can so often get caught in the doing and the point B and where are we going, that sometimes we forget to just do things that just really fill our soul. So that's why I was excited about you doing this. And I just think it's going to be so fun for you and the women. Is it open to men too, or just women?
Oh, that's a good question. I almost put women in there. Perfectly. Yeah, I was like, I put women in there. I took it out and I was like, I don't know.
I guess it would have to be the right guy.
Yeah, I think it would, because I envision it being mostly women. I really do, because or all women, because I feel like that safe space, there's something really special that happens when it's all women. Yeah.
However, there are some men who really hold space for that too, right? So we have to be careful not to. I've definitely learned that in my work, that there are some men that really are open to that as well. And sometimes I don't think we give men enough spaces to show up and be vulnerable into. But again, at the end of the day, you have to decide what fits the group better, and people can reach out to you. So you had asked me, so we're going to do something kind of fun. As soon as Cindy told me it, I was right into my perfectionism. I'm like, wow, look how quickly that showed up. We're going to do a little exercise. We'll post the link to this piece of artwork. I haven't even looked at it yet. We'll post it in the show notes so that you can follow along. And Cindy's going to walk me through we're going to look at a piece of art, right?
Yep.
And you're going to ask me questions. I have not looked at this. So I'm already I'm like, wow, I'm feeling anxiety. But this is what full frontal living is about. This is what I preach, right? we're not, whatever comes up is going to come up. Yep. All right. So do I get to open it now, Cindy?
Yes, you can open it.
I get to open it?
Okay. Yeah. So for y'all listening, this artwork is Sopa de Europa by Miquel Barceló. And it's at the Meadows Museum at SMU. So if you Google that, and then Lisa said, I think she'll post a link on the show notes as well, that you can find a picture of the artwork. Okay. And I don't normally ever give the title before I show the artwork. So you can pretend you didn't hear that, even though it was in Spanish. So you probably didn't really fully understand what it meant.
Oh my God. This is inside my brain, Cindy.
Okay. So did
you pick this just for me?
Oh no, everyone resonates with this one. So this is a good starter one. So why don't you describe what you see?
So I am seeing a man or figure. I guess it could be a woman, but immediately I thought man, sitting in a room with a round ceiling that's covered in picture frames, stacks of books to one side. I don't know what he's looking down at, but immediately when I saw it, I thought it was a book, but that was my brain going to making it a book. It's not a book. There's a globe off to his right as well, and another open book, but he just looks so defeated. My interpretation.
Yeah.
Do you want me to tell you why? I was like, oh,
okay. So good. So yeah, he's in, it looks like some sort of like European library or something. Like there's the golden frames, but everything's covered with the sort of this black paint over the gold, and the gold is kind of showing through the black paint. So it's really dark, like a dark painting with these gold highlights. And then he's in the front, and he's not looking at that back behind him at all.
Mm-mm.
So we're going to go through a process which is called Lectio Divina. It's actually a spiritual practice from, like, if you were to interpret a passage from the Bible, we're just doing that with this instead. So our first step is we're just going to talk about the narrative. So what do you think is happening in the story?
That he's,
or in the picture?
That he's studying something. This is totally my interpretation from it.
That's what it is.
I'm like completely projecting my own stuff onto this painting.
That's what this is all about. Yep.
Okay. That's because I know exactly what it's doing. So he's having to learn something or do something, and he's having a hard time with it. And he doesn't really want to be there. The darkness is kind of like how it feels. This picture is so fascinating because, for me, I'm such a kinesthetic learner. So if I do hands-on, that's how I learn. But back in the day when I used to have to study, like we all did, I would have to program in extra time for me to go to the library, because I would open up my book and I would immediately fall asleep, because it was like that part of my brain that's like, you're not smart enough, would shut down. So this picture, this is why I think this is so interesting. You picked this one. This picture like totally brings me back to that feeling of, oh my God, I have to do this. I have to pass. And I hate this. This is so hard on me. Like the whole painting feels so heavy, right? Like literally, it almost looks like he's in a tunnel.
Yeah. Okay. Good. You kind of skipped ahead a little bit, which is great, because you're going straight to that personal connection. So you got the narrative there that you think he's learning something and is struggling to learn it. He's got the stack of books, the open book. He's got this like in person, it's a lot easier to see, but it's like a bowl, and it's like a really thick texture, and it has this really like mysterious thing. And there's like little specks of like plastic in there that are blue, and you can't like make out what's in it. So it's like this murky bowl in front of him that he's like staring into. So that's just for the listeners, so they can really try to get a mental picture. You can look at this, but don't do it while you're driving. I forgot to do that caveat. I never want someone to like get in a wreck because they're looking at art while they're driving.
I know, it seems like a straightforward thing people would know, but nowadays I feel like we always have to, give like disclaimers on that.
Yeah. Oh, and then one other thing I wanted to say before we move to the next step is you keep saying in my interpretation, which is awesome. And something I always tell the people I'm working with is that your interpretation is just as important and just as valid and just as real and just as true as whatever the artist thought, as whatever the art historian thought, whoever wrote the museum label, whatever I think, whatever the guy in the museum who's walking around being pretentious, like whatever he thinks, like your interpretation is on par with everybody else's, because once the artwork leaves the artist's hands, it becomes the viewer's. It's now yours. So no matter what the artist meant this to be, it doesn't matter. It's whatever you want it, whatever it is to you. So that's another disclaimer I should have said at the beginning. Okay. So the next step is to look for symbols. So what are some things in here that you're seeing that could symbolize different things?
So the globe to me is all about freedom, because you know how much I love to travel and I want to see the world. So that's obviously something that's really near and dear to my heart right now. The bowl that he's looking into, right? So I've made this all about learning from you, but he's not actually looking into a book. He's looking into like this like blackness of nothing, right? Which is really appropriate for where I've, currently been, which is really struggling on holding my attention on possibility and not going into like the black hole of like, when are we going to be on the other side of this, for me. So that, and then just all the, I know they look like picture frames, but my heart immediately says, oh, those are all mirrors and things are just being reflected back at him. So he's looking in the deep, dark well, but if he just shifted his Jesus, if he just shifted his interpretation and looked up at the mirrors, he'd have a completely different vantage point. And that is literally what I've been working through over the last little while is, and I've shared this with you, being a coach, we can have all the tools in the book, but that doesn't mean that we don't still get lessons about where we're holding our attention and using those tools. And I've really had to look at like, how can I see the world differently? Because I know one of the things that, one of my mentors talks about is, the world is this way or that way, because we tell ourselves the world is this way or that way. And I've been really fighting for, but the world is this way, the black pit of despair. When really, even in this painting, right, if he just, if he looked up and saw the mirrors, what might he see reflected in the mirrors that would give him a completely different vantage point, than what he's looking at. So I also think it's really interesting so he's got like, it's almost like wood panels behind him. Mm-hmm. And I'm drawn to like, there's a little, do you see the figure of the man in the panel? Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's not just me making that up, but that's just interesting. I'm like, what the hell is that doing there? Just
what do you think?
Curious standpoint. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. I was just like, oh, that's really interesting. It doesn't like, seems like out of place. But then I assume that the artist would have put it there, intentionally, but I don't really have an answer as to why. To me, I'm just like, it's almost like someone came along and keyed a little man into the wall. So that's just interesting too.
Good. Okay. So we talked about the narrative. We talked about the symbols. The next step, in which you've kind of been doing all along, which is where's the personal connection to your life? So I think you've pretty much already answered that pretty well. But is there any other thoughts you have about how this relates to your life?
No, I think I kind of covered everything. It's just really like, as soon as I pulled it up on screen, I'm like, wow, this relates to where I am now, how I'm feeling now, how I felt in the past, like just different aspects of my life, because I've even been thinking about, maybe it's time for me to, get another certification or take another course. Because I haven't taken a lot of courses in the past while intentionally, right? Because it's so easy to get into that story of, I don't know enough. And I really needed to put that story down. But as I've been thinking about potentially taking another course, this whole feeling has come up again. Am I going to want to read a bunch of stuff? Am I going to have to listen to a bunch of videos? Is this going to bring me joy? And I see this and I'm like, oh God, Lisa, I need to really think about this, right? Like it has to be something that's really going to light me up for me to do it, because to be honest, still to this day, studying very much feels like that. And that is, that's just an old belief. So it's just fascinating to see that it's still very much got its teeth in me, and I'm allowing it to. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. So good. You're so good at this. Okay. Everybody's good at this. And that's the thing is I have these conversations with people and they think you can talk about this because this is something you do. Like you're just natural at this. But every single person I've ever discussed art with, they can do it. Like it's natural. It's brain wired for you to find narrative, for you to find meaning, and for you to find connection. Like you're born with it. And so it's easier than you might think. You just need to like allow it to happen. So the last step of this, and this I think you'll resonate with too, because I've, done coaching with you, and it's always, we've talked before about having an awareness of your issue is one thing, but actually like doing something with that awareness is something else that some people don't typically do. So the fourth step of this is, what are you going to do differently now that you have had this connection with this artwork? What are you going to do next?
It's a really interesting question, because the more I look at this, the more I like feel that it's almost like a tightness in my chest. And it's also like this picture too. I don't know if it does this for you. It almost has like movement to it. So when you guys look at this piece of art, it almost looks circular, like the walls around him are going to start turning, which is really interesting, because one side of the painting is more gray and the other side is more gold, almost like there's light shining on one side and there's not light shining on the other side. So for me, it's really just about, and this has been a question I've been asking myself a lot, and I know I ask my clients a lot, is, what am I going to continue to tolerate? What am And what am I going to stop tolerating in myself, in my life? Like, what stories am I still working from? Where do I need to shift where I want to interpret things in a different way? That's really what it comes down to for me right now, which has been happening. But I think this piece about learning and my beliefs that I still hold on to about learning. So I don't believe anymore that I'm stupid. Like, I put that to bed, but there is still this part of me that believes that learning is really, really hard for me and very arduous. Like, literally, I feel like my soul is being sucked out of me just looking at this figure, because that is how I feel, unless it's like a hands-on, unless it's a hands-on thing. Right. And I think that that's often why business can feel challenging for me as well, because when I'm coaching, like, that's my art, whatever comes through me, when I'm on the podcast, whatever comes out of me, I just trust that that's no longer for me. It's for the world. It's for my client. It's not for me. It's not about me. But that part of me that's like, where am I holding myself back from my growth because I'm still afraid of what I am and what I'm not capable of? And in my business, the things that feel hard for me, right? We talked about this, like some of the things that, because we both share a coach, that feel arduous. Like, you want me to do what? I have to sit down and do research and messaging, and it feels hard. Like, oh yeah, I'm gonna open up the paper. I got to read. I got to think about stuff. It's totally what I've been bumping up against, right? It's like all the things I've been told for years that I need to look at within my business are really, like, now that I'm stepping into that next level, have really come up for me. And I've really been fighting not particularly wanting to do it, because I feel like this man in this painting.
Yeah. You got to look up and see all those beautiful golden mirrors around you and make it easy.
How did you pick this picture? Just intuition?
Yeah, it's in a local museum, and a museum that I've done workshops at. Right. And so I've led this activity with teachers, and it's just it's the perfect artwork for this activity. Everybody can relate to it. But I've heard so many different interpretations, and everybody's is slightly different. And I think it's really amazing. My favorite one, though, and it shows how entrenched we are in this, like, art being this expert thing that only some people can access, is I actually led a docent training at the museum where this is at. And the docents, since they already knew so much about this painting, they had a really hard time separating what the real meaning is, real in quotes. It's called The Soup of Europe, and it's about the struggles in Europe before World War I. And there's like some assassination of someone, and I was like, no, you guys, stop. Don't think about what it's supposed to mean. Think about what you see in it. It's a totally different thing. Don't go reading about it. That's why I don't give the title. I don't tell people to do any research, because the answers are in the picture. The answers are in you. You don't need to find them somewhere else. So yeah, it's just a perfect artwork. But there's so many out there that you can really connect with and have these deep moments with, which is what my program is going to be. Lots of moments, just like what you just did.
Well, and I just, having held space for small, intimate groups of people in the past, right? You've been in rooms with, my clients. I just know the shifts that happen when people show up and share their own interpretations about what's going on and their own stories, how much healing happens from that. Because somebody else would look at, for instance, this painting and say something, and I'd be like, oh, I can see that now too. That might apply to me. And, even looking at this through the lens of, you don't care about the background of the painting because that's not what it's about. And I think I've never thought about it that way. Like, I think I believed that I needed to know the painting and know the artist and know the why. And then instead of just saying, well, if I just look at this, and this artwork was created for me, right? He painted this for me, some dude back in whenever. What can I learn about myself? It's such a beautiful way to allow people to explore their relationship with themselves. I'm really excited for you about this. This has been super fun for me because I've never experienced you in your work.
Yeah, you haven't.
No, I've never experienced that. So so knowing you the way that I do, and knowing how challenging it was for you to really connect in with your emotions, and now seeing how this work has always been a part of you. And now because you actually know how to access your emotions all the time and not just with art and how to work with them, how it's going to be so powerful for you to bring people together, because not only can you hold space now for people with their emotion and art, but you know how to hold space for people just with their emotions, period, because you've made peace with your own.
Yeah.
That's really cool, Cindy. I'm like having a proud coach moment here. Because now it's like I see the bigger picture, like the full circle moment about what you're here to evolve into. And I think that there's so many people like you and like I who are very deep feelers, and emotions can feel so overwhelming, so much so that we shut them down.
Yeah.
And this is such a beautiful gateway for you to walk people back into their emotions and also express them in a way that feels safe around others, and have these deeper conversations without talking about the actual things in their life that are necessarily going on. It'll just come out naturally in conversation.
Yeah. And it's really amazing to see what happens, because when you have the artwork there, it's just a safety net. And I've noticed it with students, they're willing to talk about things that you wouldn't say, okay, let's talk about gender bias right now. Tell me your thoughts on gender. And they're just like, wait, what are you doing to me? But if you put up artwork and there's some sort of gender something or other, they can talk about it because they can talk about something they see, they can relate it to things they know. And it just makes it easier to have those really hard conversations. Yeah. And the same is true for your feelings as well. I think when you and someone else are looking at something together that's outside of you, it makes it just a little bit easier to feel those feelings and talk about those feelings than if I just said, talk about your feelings, feel your feelings.
I know that Jake at his school, he's specifically in art therapy classes to help him access his emotions. And he's so creative, and so many people are so creative. And then, that shutdown is not being valuable. That's a whole other conversation for another day. But art is incredibly valuable. And I hope that moving forward, and especially even with this conversation, that people start to look at it through a different lens of how it can actually help them heal, help them feel, and bring them some peace in these times, right? Like there's something to be said about just losing yourself in a piece of art. Well, this has been amazing. Thank you for walking me through this. I was totally nervous. I'm like, okay, we're going to do it live, but this is how I do things, right? Like, let's just go for it. I don't know.
You did it awesome.
Vulnerable. I feel like I've gotten to know you on an even more intimate level, which I really love and appreciate.
Yes, me too. That was really fun to be on the other end of it was like I was the coach for just a minute, and I enjoyed that.
I love it. And you know what? You're amazing at what you do. So now I'm even more excited that you're putting this new, Art Connection Circle out there. So where can people find out about this? Because again, there's no fancy sales page. So don't be running off Cindy now and be making a sales page. I've known her for a long time. We're just going to stick with Google Doc and have fun with it. So how can people reach out to you, find out more? Yeah, some basic details here.
So we're going to have the link at artclasscurator.com/circle, and it will probably redirect to the Google Doc, but I can't promise you there won't be a sales page up, but there will. She does know me well, but yeah, there will. So artclasscurator.com/circle. And on that page, we'll probably have an email opt-in as well. This is brand new. So this is going to be a kind of easy, low-key launch. We're going to start the program the week of November 8th, and it will be a 5-week program with a break off for the U.S. Thanksgiving. So it basically goes right up until Christmas, and a small group that we really get to dive into this content together with assignments and live calls to share.
So good. So let this be your permission for anybody who's listening. If you think you have to have all your shit together before you go out and start something that's going to make you happy, just start.
Yeah.
Literally built my business just by saying, I think I'm going to try this thing. So I am really, really excited for you. Thank you for spending this time with me. This was a super fun episode for me. I love this kind of interaction. That painting is going to stay with me, I think, all day today. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit haunting. So make sure that you do check out the show notes and go and take a look at it, because it really is worth sitting in front of for a few minutes and seeing what comes up for you. I can't imagine anybody looking at it and not feeling something about it. The longer I look at it, the more things I see too, which is really fascinating, but that is the power of art. So thank you, Cindy, for spending this time with me. I adore you. This is
Thank
so
you for
fun.
having me. Yes, I had a great time.
I can't wait to see how this unfolds for you and for all the lucky women who choose to jump into this container with you.
Thank you.
All right. So until the next episode, everybody listening, I say this over and over and over again. You are responsible for making yourself a priority. And that means looking at ways you can care for yourself. And remember that self-care isn't something you do. It's a way of being. And it doesn't need to be hard and it doesn't need to be complicated. But if you want to show up as your best self, if you want to achieve more in this world, it really is about learning how to slow down and do less. So go out and make yourself a priority. Go find a piece of art, music, whatever it is that floats your boat, and just let yourself be with it. And then make sure you head over to Instagram and tell me how this episode and this piece of art impacted you, because I would love to hear. So until next time, I will talk to you guys on the next episode.
If your art appreciation classes were anything like mine, they happened in dark rooms with endless slides and boring lectures. Art in the dark. But art appreciation doesn't have to turn into nap time for your students. Start connecting your students to art with powerful class discussions. It can be intimidating to start talking about art with students, so teachers always want to know what they should say. The real question is what you should ask. You can get 82 questions to ask about almost any work of art for free on the Art Class Curator blog. The free download includes the list of questions, plus cards that you can cut out and laminate to use again and again. These versatile questions can be used in everything from bell ringers to group activities to critiques. Just go to artclasscurator.com/questions to get your free copy today. Thank you so much for listening to the Art Class Curator podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and give us an honest rating on iTunes to help other teachers find us and hear these amazing art conversations and art teacher insights. Be sure to tune in next week for more art inspiration and curated conversations.